All right, guys, let's talk about the hinge, all right? What it is, why it matters, and how we can improve it if you're struggling with it, okay? So essentially, what is it, all right? Well, so what we're trying to do is wind tension through the hip musculature as we shift the center of mass, right? So essentially, how well can we leverage the hip musculature while leveraging the linear move while still staying stacked enough and in a position where we can actually block and send energy up the chain? All right, that's essentially what we're trying to do here. So how do we kind of, what can go wrong if we're struggling with this? So I think one is we can get this false pelvis, right? So we kind of tip that up, whole pelvis goes back. We're gonna have some issues with loading and in terms of length tension relationships with our musculature stabilizing, all that kind of stuff. The second is we can kind of tip that torso a little bit too far forward, trying to kind of get a Paul Skeens feel but never leveling out again. And then kind of that third piece would being just a bit too linear, right? It's not just an RDL, we have to add that rotational component to it as well as we're winding this tension. All right, so if you're struggling with this, how do we go about changing it? All right, so our first drill is gonna be a hinge on the slider. Shout out to the Diesel guys down in Florida for the inspiration for this. Pretty similar to their Clevenger drill. All right, so what you're gonna do is we're gonna have one foot, the front foot will be on a slider. Back hip and foot are gonna be loaded. So think big toe, pinky toe, and heel, kind of equal weight distribution into the floor. What we're gonna do is as we slide forward, right, we're loading the back hip rotationally and we're kind of shifting a bit forward towards the wall. So as we do this, right, loading into the hip, shifting forward. And that's our first drill that we'll generally pair with one of our kind of other throwing drills to kind of get a feel for this. This will be a field drill, kind of supersetted with an actual throw. Okay, so one of our other options, we'll call this band coil and feed the mistake. So essentially, if you have issues kind of getting a little bit too far forward, right, and a little too anterior dominant, this band's gonna make that worse, right? It's gonna pull you forward. So step back till you got some pretty decent tension. And then from here, what you're gonna do, lightweight in that front leg, back leg loaded, all right, full foot. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of shift and then come on back. So we're gonna wind tension, shift my pelvis away from that back foot, and then come on back. Wind tension, shift my pelvis away from the back foot, come on back. Just like that. All right, so one of our more aggressive options would be kind of the band-assisted version of this. So essentially, all of the other things have been done pretty slow, kind of as you get a feel for it. It's how you want to go as you're learning a new skill or modifying a skill. But then eventually, we're going to add kind of more intense variation to this. So in this case, this is going to pull your center of mass forward, and you'll have to kind of maintain that stack and still wind that tension. So here's how one might look. So the hinge is something that, you know, a decent number of people will struggle with. These are just a couple of ideas about how we would kind of change the feels and the actual movement patterns that kind of go into this so we can have a better kind of experience on the mount. Feel free to drop any comments, questions below. Feel free to reach out via email if you're interested in learning more about training.